Howdy folks, Vinyl Community, Wes here checking in with a brand new episode of the Vinyl Survivor. I believe we're up to episode 108 now. This is the show where I talk about new listens for me, whether they be new releases or just albums that I've bought in the past that haven't had a chance to get to listen to. And so this is where I talk about what I listened to, what I thought of it, whether it's going to be staying in the collection or not, and try to tell you a little bit about each one and hope you have fun, hope you enjoy it, hope you're having a great day. So let's go ahead and get into it. First thing I have here is another one of the sort of archival releases from the Numero Group. This is a Numero Group's number 3 release. This is the release they did for the Bandit Label. The Bandit Label was a soul R&B kind of label out of Chicago, started by this guy here. His name is Arrow Brown. Started in the late 60s and ran up until the early 80s. And it was sort of this guy's project to create this label throughout his life. Definitely a troubled individual, a lot of problems with drugs and alcohol, and he's constantly struggling. His dream all his life was to make this label a success, and they certainly had touches with success at times, but overall the label was generally a failure. It started out just as him having house parties in his home, and would bring in performers, and then eventually started recording the performers and releasing singles of the performers. Get this guy here, Sweet Pea, which was kind of like he was trying to do the Michael Jackson sort of thing. Right at the time, Michael Jackson was starting to, catch some success on his own, apart from the Jackson 5. One thing I do love about Numero Group is they really do go and look at the history quite a bit and give you as much information about these artists and labels that they dig up as much as they can. So the story of the Bandit label I find is more interesting than the music itself. The music itself is okay, it's good, it's that northern soul kind of sound, Chicago 70s soul kind of stuff. You kind of know what you're going to get. So the Bandit label released only one LP. The rest were just all singles, and the LP was by the Majestic Arrows, and this is the album they released, The Magic of the Majestic Arrows. And just sort of a northern soul 70s kind of sound. Did enjoy hearing that. So that's the first LP in the set, and then it's a 3 LP set. And the second 2 LPs are all the singles that the label released on 2 LPs. They released 12 singles, I believe, during the label's period of releasing singles, and so about 24 tracks here. So it's a really interesting look into a label that probably not many people have heard about, and it was just an interesting experience, and I do enjoy getting these Numero Group releases from time to time. They are very reasonably priced. This was only $30 I paid for this 3 LP box set with a book, which is really good. Nice, fairly heavyweight vinyl here. Sort of Numero Group generic labels there. The one knock I do have against the Numero Group is that they do press their vinyl at United in Nashville. It can be sort of hit or miss as far as the quality goes when it comes to United. These are done pretty well, got lucky on these, but United, you never quite know what you're going to get. It's fun to explore these Numero Group releases and explore artists and labels and people, music that you wouldn't have normally heard otherwise. So for that I respect them, and I enjoy checking out their releases. So did really enjoy listening to the Bandit Label number 3 on Numero Group releases. Next up, I have a solo release from Stevie Nicks. This is titled Rock a Little from 1985. Definitely a very 80s tight production, very synth-based kind of, 80s pop music here. The big song on here was Talk to Me, I think was the big hit on here, pretty big hit that you still hear from time to time on radio. And in general, I'm not really much of a Stevie Nicks fan. I'm more of a Christine McVie fan, I guess you could say. So this one was okay to listen to, but I didn't really find much interesting about this at all. It was just kind of just very generic pop 80s sensibility sort of sound to me. Insert with lyrics there. Custom labels on there. It was mastered at Precision. Pressing was done at Specialty Records. So yeah, it just didn't do much for me. I'm not going to be keeping this album. I was glad I got a chance to listen to it, but not a keeper for me. Just a little too generic, not very memorable, and not something I think I want to revisit anytime soon. Next thing I have to talk about is Little Queen by Heart from 1977. Sort of a classic one here. You got Barracuda on here, of course, but yeah, definitely a well-known album from Heart. Again, printed lyrics on the Portrait label, and yeah, I enjoy Heart. I enjoy this album quite a bit. Unfortunately, this one's not a keeper for me just because of some quality issues. I believe it had a skip in one spot. There's a big scratch that I didn't notice. It was I think this was probably a thrift store find for me. I wouldn't have bought this in a record store or anything. Yeah, once I cleaned it up, there was a scratch there. Sometimes they're so dirty you can't even see the scratches. But yeah, unfortunately that's not a keeper for me, but a good album, and I'm still on the hunt for a good quality copy of that album. Alright, next thing is another solo album from David Gilmour. This is titled About Face, 1984 from this one. Yeah, 1984. So yeah, again, very tight 80s production on here. But it is David Gilmour. If you're a Pink Floyd fan, you're going to recognize his guitar playing, his guitar work, his sound. This album is just okay. I liked his debut solo album much better than this. This has good moments on it, but overall not as good as his debut in my opinion. Some lyrics and photos on the insert. There's the Columbia label being related to Pink Floyd there. And pressed or mastered at the mastering lab in LA. And sounds good as usual. That's one thing you can say about the Pink Floyd related stuff is that it generally sounds pretty good. It was, they tended, even to this day, their stuff is mastered at the mastering lab and it sounds good. This album is no different. I mean, it's a good sounding album. Just the music itself is a little bit of a letdown for me. The hype sticker. This was in shrink when I bought it, so I cut that off. So yeah, David Gilmour's About Face. If you find it for cheap and you're a Pink Floyd fan, maybe pick it up. But this is not something you just have to hear. But it's good. It's enjoyable. It's a nice album to put on. All right, next up is the mid-'80s release from Prince. This is titled Around the World in a Day, 1984, I believe this was when this was done. 1985, okay, it was a year off. A well-known album from Prince. And an album I was glad to actually finally listen to the whole thing. You have, Paisley Park is on here, Raspberry Beret is on here, but the album overall was really enjoyable for me. It is again very 80s. There's a lot of electronic work on here that is really interesting sounding. Some sort of deep tracks kind of things that are interesting if you're into 80s electronic synthy kind of stuff. Definitely a good album to check out and not a hard one, not a difficult one to find. There's the gatefold, very colorful looking album there. Overall themes, I really like the artwork on this one. Some cool looking custom labels on there as well. And was pressed at SRC as well. So yeah, Prince's Around the World in a Day. Definitely, I'm recommending this one. It's definitely fits my taste and likes, and I'm glad to have this one in the collection now. I'm glad I finally got a chance to listen to it. All right, next up, something that's definitely not from the 80s. This is the complete collection of Robert Johnson 2 LP set on Not Now Music out of the UK. So basically his entire recorded works on 2 LPs. It's one of the labels. I believe these are pressed at in the Czech Republic at GZ Vinyl. Has the markings in the dead wax have that look to them. And I think I've run into that before with Not Now Music pressings. So yeah, it's just cool to have this music in a collection. You know, some of the recordings are really rough sounding. They come from 78s, you know, so very tinny kind of sound. But just classic recordings and a classic blues artist, and I'm glad to have this in the collection, and it's really cool to add this to the collection. Got this pretty cheaply. I think Amazon UK made a mistake on the pricing on this at one point. Joseph O'Donnell, if anyone remembers him, turned us on to this several years ago now. Finally, just now getting to listening to it. So yeah, just classic collection of classic blues from Robert Johnson, and something enjoyed listening to. Okay, once again back into I guess you could say modern times, but with an 80s synth pop sort of vibe to it. This is the album from last year from Perfume Genius, titled Too Bright, 2014 on Matador Records. And I just totally fell in love with this artist and this album. Really in your face, some really great modern synth pop music here. Very androgynous, very sexual, very queer. It's really cool. I love it. It's definitely right up my alley. Inner sleeve with some lyrics on it. This as well was pressed at United, mastered by Wes Garland there. So not the quietest piece of vinyl, but as I said, I love the music. I'm glad I bought this. If you're definitely looking for a queer sort of synth pop sort of stuff, this is really good. I love the songs here. It's very in your face with its queerness, and I love that quite a bit. So, Perfume Genius, Too Bright, definitely an artist I discovered and like, and definitely gonna be staying in the collection. Hopefully, I can find some more stuff. All right, next up, staying in sort of the modern synth pop sort of vibe, we have an album from Exit Music. This is titled Passage from 2012. This is a band I discovered on NPR's All Songs Considered podcast. Definitely, you know, very chill, kind of synthy, washy sort of sound to it. Very cool sounding. I think the cover art works well with the music on here. The group Exit Music there, Aleska Palladino and Devin Church are their names. Some liner notes there. Pressed on some cool white vinyl with a neat custom label there. This label has the track listing on it on this side. Unfortunately, this vinyl is pretty noisy, and it definitely degrades from this music, which is very silent, very ambient at times, and the surface noise just really detracts from the music here. I actually complained to the label, and they sent me another copy, and it was just as noisy, if not noisier. So yeah, this is something maybe you might want to get digitally if you can, if you want to check it out at least. But the music is really good. As I said, this is something I heard on the podcast for All Songs Considered. Really like this. Really like the sound. I really like the sort of chill, echoey, vocally chill, sort of ambient, synthy kind of stuff that's popular nowadays. And so, definitely recommend this group. But can't really recommend the vinyl, unfortunately. All right, next up, keeping it well mixed here, I guess you could say. Definitely not synthy or poppy or anything. This is some doom metal from the band Earth. This is Earth 2 from 1993, I believe. Even though this says Earth 2 on it, I believe this is Earth's debut album. This is a reissue on Sub Pop. Been in print for a good long while now as a reissue. Very doomy, slow, sludge kind of metal, but I still have a trouble calling this kind of music metal because it's so melodic and it's so ambient. It doesn't have that sort of grating sound that metal can have to me. That's why I love this kind of music. I do have an insert here on a 2 LP set on Sub Pop. Kind of generic looking, almost vintage looking labels there. Just a good sounding piece of vinyl as usual. I love wherever Sub Pop has their stuff done, they do a good job of it. And managed to pick this up in the used bin for $9, which is a pretty good deal. Even new, I think this only sold for about $16. So yeah, cool to have the debut album from the band Earth in the collection. And if you like doom metal, sludge metal kind of stuff, and you haven't heard this for some reason, check it out. It's good. All right, and last but not least is another release from the Wax Poetics record label. This is Melvin Price with Rhythm and Blues, originally released in 1974, but recently reissued by Wax Poetics. I don't know when they did this, somewhere around 2009, I'm guessing. This is Wax Poetics Records number 004. And this is not rhythm and blues, this is sort of a fusiony, jazzy, Latin kind of sound. Definitely very rhythmic, very Latin, but also very jazzy. This tells a bit of the story of Melvin Price and the recording of these albums. It's part of a trilogy that was recorded in Sweden. I believe he spent some time in his youth in Sweden and then moved to America, and then after Martin Luther King was assassinated, decided to move back to Sweden and sort of live in exile, I guess you could say. Definitely teamed up with some cool Swedish jazz artists on here, and really great jazz music here. There's the label on this one. Pretty generic, but yeah, a really great piece of Latin soul jazz, recorded in Sweden, so it has that world influence to it, and just a great piece of music. So I was glad to have this in the collection. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Vinyl Survivor. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Stay tuned for more episodes, and we'll see you again real soon. Cheers.